Hello, my name is Nadine Abdulatif, and today I will be comparing and contrasting sensory receptors from Lecture 6. So, let's get an introduction to the sensory receptors. Sensory receptors are pretty much specialized structures that help us detect and respond to the environment that we live in. These receptors is what converts the stimuli into neural signals that get processed and sent to our brain. And we have two main types of sensory receptors. We have neuronal sensory receptors and we have non-neuronal sensory receptors. For neuronal sensory receptors, they include simple and complex sensory receptors. So pretty much for the simple one and actually the complex, they both have afferent neurons. Um, and pretty much the simple ones have free nerve endings, whereas the complex ones have their nerve endings encased in connective tissue. For the non-neuronal sensory receptors, they actually don't fire any action potentials on their own, but they release chemical messengers that modulate afferent neurons. Let's compare and contrast sensory receptors. So we have five sensory receptors. They consist of chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, nociceptors, and photoreceptors. So chemoreceptors is kind of like chemicals. They detect chemicals, and they're located in the tongue, blood vessel, and the nose. And they can be both neuronal and non-neuronal. Mechanoreceptors, think of it as mechanical. It detects mechanical forces, and we see these in the muscles, the skin, or the ears. And they can also be neural or non. Sorry, they could also be neuronal and non-neuronal. And then we have thermoreceptors, which is pretty much what you can think of it as. It's temperature. It detects how the temperature changes, and these are located in the brain and the skin. These are non-neuronal. Then the next one, it detects pain and tissue damage. We find these in our bones, our skin, and our organs, and it's also neuronal. Photoreceptors detects light, and they're located in the eye, specifically in the retina, and it's also neuronal. Now, chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors both have functions. For the chemoreceptors, the functions are pretty much flavor, odor, oxygen, CO2, and toxins, whereas the mechanoreceptors their functions are proprioception, touch, blood vessels, sound, vibration, etc. So we have similarities and differences for these receptors. To start off with the similarities, some receptors, like chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors, can be either neuronal or non-neuronal. Additionally, mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, and nociceptors are all found in the skin, allowing us to detect touch, pain, and temperature. All sensory receptors play a crucial role in detecting specific stimuli, which allows us to transmit that information to the brain for interpretation. For the differences, we see that different receptors detect different types of stimuli. So, for example, we have photoreceptors, which respond to light. We have chemoreceptors, which respond to chemicals, and mechanoreceptors, which respond to pressure. So, and their location, they vary as well. So, photoreceptors are found only in the eye, as we said earlier, in the retina, while nociceptors are distributed all over the body to detect pain. To add on to this, some receptors actually respond faster than others. For example, chemoreceptors respond slower than mechanoreceptors. This is because chemoreceptors, which involve taste and smell, they take a longer time to detect the stimuli and send the signals to our brain than mechanoreceptors, which responds to touch, which we respond to we feel really quickly. Now to conclude, we know that sensory receptors allow us to detect stimuli when we are adapting to our environment. They detect different types of stimuli and convert them into neural signals that the brain can interpret. Each receptor type is specialized for a particular function that is distributed throughout the body based on its purpose. We have some receptors like nociceptors that are spread throughout the body to ensure we can detect pain from any location, while others, such as photoreceptors, for example, are only found in our eyes, in our retina. Finally, some receptors fire action potentials directly, while others modulate neurons to pretty much send signals to the brain. Now, I want to leave you guys off with a question to see or test your understanding. So, why do you guys think pain receptors spread throughout our whole entire body and not just a specific area in our body?